be wow. And it just did that. There you go. I've got that. Thank you, robot, for letting us know. But I am confident you'll be wowed at the education that will provided today by Miss Kaye Allison Cruz. Now, speaking of Miss Kaye Allison Cruz, I'm introducing her as an esteemed individual. As a matter of fact, she is a professional parliamentarian. She is also the immediate past president of the American Institute of Parliamentarians. Bear with me just a moment. I am throwing myself off here. And I asked early on if I could call her Miss Kaye, if she had any objections to that, and she's just fine with me calling her Miss Kaye. But she is a CPPT, which is a certified professional parliamentarian, and also a PRP, which is a professional registered parliamentarian. Get this, fewer than 50 people hold that dual credential. What does that tell you? That tells you that we are definitely going to be honored with some educational pleasures today. So to go further, in 2020, Ms. Kaye was chosen as the chair of the Joint Committee on the Review of the Code of Ethics, a committee populated by professional parliamentarians representing both the National Association of Parliamentarians and the AIP, that is the American Institute of Parliamentarians. That committee drafted and adopted the Joint Code of Professional Responsibility, which is used by all members of professional parliamentary associations. Ms. Kaye is currently serving as the project manager for the authorship team, which is editing the AIP Standard Code of Parliamentary Procedure. And she's also serving as director of the accrediting department for AIP. Lastly, Ms. Kaye teaches basic parliamentary procedure professionally through the University of Wisconsin's Independent Learning Department. Now, if you all are ready to get educated and to have some fun, without further ado, I introduce to you Miss Kaye Allison Cruz.
Thank you very much, Ross, and everyone for that warm welcome. I appreciate it. I'm so glad to be here with you. Emily asked me to come and to present to you guys. She's gotten to hear me before, so it's always fun to have someone that's heard you once before say, hey, this was good enough. I'm willing to listen to it again. So there you go. If it goes well, then it's all on her. So thank you. I'm going to share my screen. I do have a PowerPoint for us all. So we will go through, and Emily, you're at the top of my window. So will you give me a thumbs up if you are seeing my screen in the way that I want it looking? Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So I will tell y'all that I will not be following the chat. Y'all are welcome to chat, but I've told Ross that I will stop from time to time and ask him if there are questions. If you have questions, feel free to raise your Zoom hand or catch Ross's attention in some other way. And we'll kind of stop at several predetermined sections throughout, so you have an opportunity to ask questions. I want this to be the learning experience that you want, not just the one that I want to offer to you. So the first thing that I'm going to tell you is that Robert's Rules of Order is a great book, but they left out the most important rule of them all. And that is the rule that I call Kaye's Rule of Order. And that is that members have a right to an efficient meeting. If your meetings aren't efficient, if they're not good, then people vote with their feet and don't come back again. So I'm going to stop and ask for just a second. I know y'all are experienced Zoomers, so I think we're going to be able to handle this. I want you to signal to me or to Ross if you've ever been to a bad meeting. Not a Toastmasters meeting. I know those are all run very, very well, but perhaps for some other organization. So Emily, I do see your hand up. Why don't you unmute real quick and tell me what made it bad?
I was trying to join a community organization group that was going to do things like pick up litter and decorate parks and plants. And they would have an agenda, but they did not follow their agenda, and they let anybody talk at any point about anything. And so meetings that were supposed to take 45 minutes to an hour were taking easily 2 hours, because people were allowed to get up and soapbox about things that weren't even on the agenda at any point and completely divert the meetings. And it was just painful, and I couldn't do it. After my second meeting, I was like, I'm out.
There you go. A worthy project that would have benefited from your participation, and you're not there because of bad meetings.
Ms. Kaye, we have 2 individuals that have raised their hands. One being Mr. Andrew Kramer.
Okay, Andrew.
I was just going to respond. I was just responding to your call for people that had been to meetings that were off the rails and not efficient. I just went to actually to a Toastmasters that it's a civic club that I was interested in joining, because they do improv in their meetings. They don't have an agenda. They don't have it set up to where they have everybody timed properly. So they run out of time every time to do the improv, or they do it quickly for like 2 minutes. And that's the whole point of their what makes the club special. So it doesn't make the club special, it makes it chaos. And they asked me to join. I'm like, no, I'm sorry, I can't do that. You need to figure out your agenda and figure out the way your meeting flows, because you're missing your own point.
Exactly. Exactly. Ross, you said there was another hand up?
Yes, I believe Donna Young raised her hand, and she may have been just acknowledging as well, but I'll let Donna speak real quick.
I attended a meeting where they showed up right on time when the meeting was supposed to start in person, but it was at a church and all the lights were out. And I thought I was in the wrong spot. And I'd called ahead, so I knew the meeting was being held. So I just hung out there in the dark waiting till everybody could arrive. But there was actually a visiting guest who walked up to me and said, am I in the right place for Toastmasters?
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a lot that goes into having and preparing for an efficient meeting. So one of the ways that we have parliamentary procedure, and Donna, I'm going to freely admit, parliamentary procedure has very little to do with getting the lights turned on time. But there's a lot of other organizational pieces that we can help you with. And I know both Emily and Andrew talked about the fact that having a really well-formed, crafted agenda helps. And we're going to talk about that at some length. So overall, what are parliamentary rules there to do? Well, they're there, first of all, to help us expedite business, to maintain some order so that we can stick to that agenda, to ensure justice and fairness and provide equal treatment for all of our members, right? And finally, all of those things together are going to help organizations accomplish their purposes so that we're going to be able to do whatever it is that we've all come together to do, whether it's to learn to be better professional speakers at our Toastmasters Club, or to beautify our neighborhood, as Emily tried to do and wasn't able to because they weren't organized enough to accomplish their purpose. Same thing with Andrew and the Improv Club. So parliamentary procedure is based on the will of the majority, right? We've all heard that saying, the majority rules, and we're going to come back to that over and over and over. But there's also a right of the minority to be heard. If you have a different opinion, if you are the contrarian in your group, you still have a right to have your voice heard and to let your opinion be expressed and to try to sway those in the majority to agree with you. Protection for the rights of absentees, and we're going to talk about how to do that. Again, we're going to go back a little bit to agenda and to meeting notices for ways that we protect the rights of the absent. Courtesy and justice for all, another underlying theme you're going to hear throughout this, this presentation. And finally, Roberts thinks that you can get more done if you only talk about one thing at a time, get that one major subject accomplished, and then go on to the next one. That may be part of what Emily's challenge was at her neighborhood association, was people talking about too many things all at one time. That can happen. So membership has privileges. One of the things that was interesting to me this morning was hearing how many of you are not from the Dallas area, which, as I understand it, is where this Toastmasters district is. And we had folks from Pennsylvania and New Jersey and California. Thank you for getting up early to be with us this morning. And I, of course, am at the moment anyway, down near Houston for some family obligations this weekend. So all of us are not members of District 25. But those of you who are members of District 25 at business meetings have a fundamental right, have several fundamental rights. You have the right to attend meetings, and that carries with it the right to know when they are. So to get notice that we're going to have a meeting, the right to make motions, to debate, and to vote. Those are all fundamental rights of membership that you cannot remove in some cases at all. And in some cases, you can limit the right to debate with a higher vote. And finally, as we've said before, the majority rules in almost every instance. But now let's talk for just a minute about what that means. A lot of people come up with a lot of definitions of what the majority is, right? And a lot of people want to tell me, oh, it's 51%, or it's 50% plus one, or it's, I had someone tell me once it was 66%. And I was like, will you please go back to basic high school math? So the majority is more than half. And we always simply say it is more than half, because sometimes if you do 50% plus one, you're going to come up with 26 and a half as your 50% plus one. And then you divide it. It does not work in all instances. So simply saying more than half of those present and voting is a majority is a fundamental thing I want you to know. Sometimes a vote requires 2/3. Frequently, I see this in governing documents, right? People want to amend their bylaws or something of that nature. And so that takes a 2/3 vote. And that's 2/3 of those present and voting. Now, parliamentarians, God love us, we are not real mathematical people, right? We are word people. We are not math people. So I always remember 2/3 means that there have to be twice as many in favor as there are opposed. And if there are twice as many in favor, then that means that there is 2/3, and that vote that took 2/3 was adopted. Then there are some things where the chair decides. Someone may raise a point of privilege, a question of privilege that they can't hear. And so the chair will just say, will the event person please ensure that the speakers are turned up? Or will the speaker please speak up or speak closer to the microphone? The chair just determines how we're going to handle that. And then there are a couple of things that can be done on the request of a single member. One of those is if you question that the chair is calling the vote right, a single member can ask to have that vote verified with a visual method, right? You've taken a voice vote. It sounded to you like the nose had it and the chair called that the ayes had it. You simply say, I call for a division, or simply division. And that asks the chair then to take that vote again using a visual method. So raising your hand or standing up, holding up colored cards. And that's something that any single member has the right to do at any point. So those are kind of some fundamentals about meetings. Are there any questions up to this point? And I'll just tell y'all a little hint. When you see this little hollow star in the lower left corner, that probably means I'm about to stop and ask if there are questions.
Ms. Kaye, we don't have any questions at the moment.
I love that. Well, then let's go ahead and talk about your governing documents, right? All groups have rules, and it's important to know what the rules are that you're going to follow and that they have a hierarchy. And so it's important for you to know and understand that hierarchy of rules. So our governing documents, there's some things that are pretty obvious, right? First of all, our fundamental governing documents are always federal and state law. No matter how much it would be helpful, you cannot make a motion to go and knock over First National Bank in order to meet your budget, right? You've got to follow all the state and federal laws. And while I don't think anyone's ever tried to balance their budget by robbing a bank, there are, in many instances, state and federal laws, not federal laws as much, but state laws that apply to nonprofit governance. And so sometimes there are rules in your state law that, for instance, may tell you that electronic meetings are permitted or that they are prohibited unless allowed in your bylaws. They may establish notice, they may establish special meetings. And so it's important to take a quick look if you're in leadership at what your state laws say for your type of organization. Next is your charter or your articles of incorporation. This kind of encompasses two different documents. One, a charter and articles of incorporation is the document issued by the state that says that you can exist. So nonprofit organizations and for-profit organizations in Texas have to have a certificate of formation. That's what we call that document here in the state of Texas. Most states call it either articles of incorporation or a charter. And it lists your fundamental principles, what we're established to do, what our name is, who our initial founding officers are, how long we expect to exist. Sometimes, though, you can also get a charter from a federal or a national-based organization. So Toastmasters, probably charters, it's different subsidiary organizations. And in that you say, hey, I'm a part of Toastmasters and I'm going to abide by their rules. That's very common with a lot of national organizations. The PTA is another one where you're going to get a charter from the national PTA saying that your state can have a PTA, and then your local PTAs are then chartered by the state association. Next, you have your constitution and bylaws. Usually, most organizations only have bylaws now. Constitution is something that I only see used in labor unions right now. That's the main groups that have that. But it is your rules affecting the organization. It's a contract. It's a contract between the members and the organization, and a contract between the members themselves as members of the organization. And it's very important, and it usually requires previous notice and a 2/3 vote in order to amend those. Next, you have special rules of order and rules of order. I'm going to talk about those together. Rules of order are your Roberts rules of order, right? Like I've got over my shoulder here. That's your governing parliamentary authority. The name of that parliamentary authority should be included in your bylaws. Roberts Rules of Order is certainly the best known one, but there are others that in many instances are somewhat more simple and are easier for people to understand than Roberts Rules of Order, but Roberts is certainly encyclopedic and kind of the one that most people are familiar with. Sometimes, though, Roberts has a rule in it, or your parliamentary authority, whatever it is, that you'd like to change. And that's when you're allowed then to create a special rule of order that takes priority over that parliamentary authority. So let me give you an example. Robert's Rules of Order says that every member has the right to speak in debate for 10 minutes every time that they speak, and that members may speak 2 times each day on each debatable question. So that's 20 minutes of debate on every main motion, plus every amendment, plus whatever per person. I love y'all all like brothers and sisters, but I don't want to listen to any of you talk for 10 minutes on a single subject, right? Unless you're giving a presentation. So most of the organizations that I belong to have set special rules of order that say you can speak for 2 minutes, or you can speak for 5 minutes the first time and 3 minutes the second time, or you can speak for 5 minutes, but only one time. So you can have different rules than those established in Robert's Rules of Order. The next type of rules are standing rules. These are what I kind of call administrivia. You have to silence your cell phone. You have to wear your name tag. You have to register for the Zoom meetings. Those are all rules that don't deal with parliamentary procedure or with actually running your meeting, but when you're there, they make your meeting run a little bit more smoothly, right? And then finally, at the tip of the spear, there is custom. Custom is the unwritten rules, the things where people say, well, we've always done it that way. We don't have to write it down. We know this. We've always done it this way. Usually that means you did it that way the last 2 meetings that that person was there at, or they did it at another meeting they've just forgotten. Custom can be followed if everyone agrees to follow it, as long as it does not conflict with any of these other rules lower than it. If, however, it does conflict with something in your bylaws or in your standing rules, then custom falls to the ground and you have to follow your written rules. And if you want to follow custom, then you have to amend one of your written rules, the appropriate rule where that would go. So are there any questions on governing documents? There's a lot packed into that one slide.
Yes, there is, Ms. Kaye. Actually, let me ask one question to
Sure.
the previous slide, and that's in asking, how does a quorum fit in?
Great question. A quorum is the minimum number of people who must be present in order to conduct business. And so usually it's a fixed number. Some organizations have a percentage. I don't like percentages, A, because it requires math, and B, because you have to know exactly how many members you have at a given point in order to be able to figure out what that quorum is if it's a percentage. So I like hard numbers, and that number varies if you don't have one established. Roberts will tell you that it is a majority of your membership. For some organizations, that makes a lot of sense, right? I've got some organizations that are run by a board of 20-something members, and they all show up every meeting. A quorum of a majority is fine. We can accomplish a lot with that. My DAR chapter, on the other hand, has got a lot of members that we will never see again because they're in a nursing home and not able to travel and unable to do Zoom. And so they don't participate, but they still pay their dues. They're still members. If we had a majority of the membership, we'd never get that. So our quorum in that group is very low. It's actually about 5%, 25 members of our group, which is fairly large. So,
All right.
So it all varies.
Very good. Thank you. Now to the present slide, governing documents. There's 3 questions, and hopefully we'll tap it at that on the 3 questions. So the first one is, should all members have a copy of the Articles of Incorporation?
Absolutely. Absolutely. None of your rules should be secret ever, because you expect your members to abide by them.
Right. Okay, thank you. And the next question is, how does organizational charts factor into the hierarchy? As an example, in regards to a nonprofit organization.
Well, I think of an organizational chart, and feel free to correct me if I'm not thinking about this in the way that it's meant, of an organizational chart as being about people and not about your governing documents, but instead about, you know, this person reports to that person, or this committee is subsidiary to that committee, or is overseen by this national officer. So I don't see that org charts. I would assume if you had them, they would fall in this area of standing rules, because it would be something that would be easily changeable. But really I mean, it shouldn't be that. You should never have personnel decisions based on decisions in these documents other than your elected officers. But staff, which is what I'm thinking of in organizational chart terms, you should never be taking up staff issues in a meeting in general anyway, unless it's a closed board meeting.
Okay, very good information. The last one we have is related to special rules of order. Can they be made on the fly? As an example, limiting debate to 1 minute each because of a time limit in each of the particular meetings.
Interesting question. And if you want that to apply at that one meeting, yes, they can. Takes 2/3 vote and is not debatable. If, however, you want it to be a permanent rule, then you have to adopt it much like you would a bylaw, with previous notice and a 2/3 vote. And then it's a permanent special rule of order that would apply to all of your meetings.
Great. That's all we have.
Excellent. Well, in that case, let's get on and talk about agendas. What is an agenda? Well, it's a list of meeting activities in the order we plan to take it up. You can, but don't have to include specific items of business. And it may have specific times. I work with some organizations where they put times on their agendas more as guidelines than as hard and fast rules. But I work with one group that tries to use them as a hard and fast rule. Sometimes that works better than others. Sometimes you also hear this referred to as an order of business or even a program. And those terms can all be used, but you have to be careful with program, because sometimes that also applies to, like, you know, the person that's bringing the after lunch entertainment, right? Our program today is Kaye talking about the 10 funniest things in parliamentary procedure. Please don't ask me to come do that one. But that's what it is. Generally in an agenda, we're talking about meeting activities. So all types of meetings should have an agenda. It doesn't have to be real formal, but you should always have one, and it should have some standard characteristics. So we're going to talk about what Robert says is the agenda in a regular meeting. And you're going to think, golly, that is the craziest looking graphic I ever saw. What is that? And I am here to tell you that is Mrs. Sun. And she is here to help you remember what to take care of in your agenda. You're going to first do the minutes. Then you're going to take care of your reports of officers and standing committee chairmen. Then you're going to hear any special committee reports, if there are any. Special orders, those are things that Robert says are required to be done in the bylaws. Usually the thing that people remember that they have to do, because it's in their bylaws, is hold elections, or perhaps elect a nominating committee or take nominations. Those things should be defined on when they happen in the bylaws, and that would come up under special orders. Unfinished business. We'll talk about what that is in just a minute. It may not be what you're thinking it is. And then finally, new business. And if you look at these bold letters going down, what do they spell? Mrs. Sun. So that is how you remember what your standard order of items in the agenda are. So let's kind of walk through each of these and see what they're all about. Minutes. Minutes are the first piece of business we handle, but they can be preceded by opening ceremonies and rituals. And my DAR chapter has a 20-minute opening ritual. We pray, we pledge, we sing, we recite the preamble to the Constitution. We hear the object of the DAR. I mean, it takes us 20 minutes to get through all this stuff some days. And then we take up the minutes. But those are all our standard opening ceremonies and rituals. Other groups may have those. Now, we handle the minutes first, but there are a lot of different ways to do it. You can, of course, stand up and shake your piece of paper in your hand and read them out loud. And Emily's yawning just thinking about it. I don't blame you. That is a time suck and it is boring, and don't do it. You can distribute draft minutes to the membership. And if you do that, make sure you label them draft. I put it in a big watermark on the back and send them PDF, but I don't like that either. My favorite way is to appoint a minutes approval committee. This is a committee of, depending on how big the meeting is, anywhere from 2 to 5 members that are authorized and given the authority to adopt the minutes of this meeting, so that when I come back to the next meeting, I've already got adopted minutes. And when it comes up on the agenda for the minutes, I say, hey, the minutes were approved by a committee of Emily, Andrew, and Donna. We thank them for their service. We will have Hamilton, Joe, and Frank review the minutes for this meeting unless there is an objection. There is no objection. Thank you for your service. Now, if someone thinks that there's still some corrections to the minutes, they can raise their hand and say, hey, I've still got corrections to these minutes. Yeah, they misspell my name. Here's the real secret. All anyone ever looks for in the minutes is to make sure you spell their name right. So as long as you get that hill conquered, then they're not going to usually question your minutes. Next up are the reports of officers and standing committee chairmen. Officers report first, and they report by rank. What do I mean by rank? Well, I mean in their order of priority. Where do you think I'm going to find that order of priority? Emily, unmute and tell me again, because I know you're saying the right thing.
I'm whispering over here, trying to get hints out. In the bylaws, Donna put it in the chat too. So yes.
Excellent. Yes, that is correct. In the bylaws, right? So always list your order, your officers in order in the bylaws. President first, followed by the vice presidents and so forth. So officers are going to report first, followed by standing committees who also report in their rank, which is oddly enough also the order listed in the bylaws. And your standing committees should be listed in the bylaws, or there should at least be a list of them somewhere, so that you know who they are and what their duties are. Reports of officers and standing committees are not adopted, right? We don't need to adopt every word that they said. Instead, what the chair should say after the report is over, and it is very complex, so listen carefully. The chair should say, thank you. The next report in order is, right? So maybe not so hard for those of us who are true Southerners, because thank you just comes out pretty easily. If, however, an officer or a standing committee chairman has recommendations in their report, then those are taken up immediately after their report is over, while the business is still fresh on everyone's mind. After the reports of officers and standing committee chairs come your special committees. Special committees are not listed in the bylaws because they've been appointed for a specific purpose, after which point they're going to fall to the ground when they finish their work. They're called on in the order that they were appointed. They should only be called on if they have something to say or if they've been instructed to report on that day, right? Sometimes a special committee is instructed, come back and report at the March meeting, and then they're supposed to be there and you call on them regardless. Otherwise, for all these folks, for the officers, for the standing committee chair, if I'm presiding, I am calling them up or Facebooking them or texting them and saying, are you going to have a report for this meeting? And if they're not, then I'm going to say, the secretary tells me she has no further business to report. The next business will be the treasurer's report. Again, that's the efficient way to do the meeting. And we're going back to Kaye's rules of order that members deserve that efficient meeting.
Okay, I have a question for you.
You bet.
Before you carry on. So the one question is, does a minutes approval committee or should a minutes approval committee have to be in the bylaws?
It is not, it does not have to be, it can be. And some groups I belong to have a permanent minutes approval committee that's got a term of office that goes with the presiding officers. Others are appointed at each meeting, so that, yeah, it's a great way to maybe get a new person involved, is to put them on the minute approval committee with two more experienced people who actually know what was going on. And that way they have some new contacts that they can reach out to if there's, if they have a question or to help them learn more about your organization. So I'm always looking for ways to get new members kind of sucked in. Minute approval committee is a pretty good one.
Okay, two more questions quickly.
Sure.
How often should standing committees report?
As often as they need to. So they should always report at the annual meeting, the last meeting of the year, to tell you what they've accomplished over that term. But otherwise, if they have need to, they can report at every meeting. If they don't, then they only report if they need to.
All right, lastly would be, are any reports required monthly or quarterly?
Treasurer's report would be the only thing that I think that you should always be getting at each meeting. And again, treasurer's report should never, ever, ever, ever be adopted, because that's the treasurer's report of their books. Instead, what you do want to adopt at the end of the year, it's the only report I ever suggest you do adopt, is the report of the audit committee, which has then gone back and said, yes, the treasurer's reports are correct. And so that you should adopt. It relieves the treasurer of the responsibility for the books because someone else has looked at them, but you do not want to adopt treasurer's reports straight up, because no one's had a chance to look at them but the treasurer. Lord knows what could be in there. And sadly, I've seen some groups where that's a problem. Okay.
Right.
Any other questions, Ross?
Not at the moment.
Okay, well, we'll keep going, keep putting those questions up. So special orders. Special orders come next on the agenda. That's the business that's required by the bylaws to be taken up at this meeting. Like I said, the most common examples are nominations and elections. Again, my DAR chapter, they're just kind of a unique group, requires that the memorial service be at a specific meeting. There may be other things. So when you become president of an organization, the first thing you should do is sit down and read your bylaws with your calendar next to you, so you know all those things that have to be done and when, so that you don't get embarrassed by someone saying, excuse me, aren't we supposed to elect a nominating committee at this meeting? That's really bad when that happens. You can also make something a special order by postponing it and establishing a time and doing that with a 2/3 vote. And that then gives that special order priority over all other unfinished and new business. I don't see that used very much in organizations, but it's a tool that's there, but I don't talk about it much because really nobody does that much. Unfinished business, several editions of the book ago, it was called old business. Then someone was afraid that maybe the parliamentarians were all getting too much gray hair, and you would think that we were the old business, and that's not a good thing. So we changed it to unfinished business. That includes the item that was being discussed at the time that the last meeting adjourned. So you had a motion on the floor. While you're taking up and considering that motion, somebody raises their hand and moves to adjourn, and they adopt that motion, and everyone goes home with a motion still on the floor. Now, has anybody ever been in a meeting where they've seen that happen? I'm going to bet not. I've seen it happen twice with the same group. So labor union I have here in Dallas. Emily, your husband may work for them. And that was because things were about to get so contentious that they thought that it would be better for the organization for them to leave. And we knew we were coming back in a week, right? Very unique fact pattern. I've never seen anyone else, nor do very many of my colleagues see this happen very much. So you probably will never have that. Or unfinished business from the previous meeting. Well, I'm going to bet that you don't have that much either, or items postponed until this meeting. That's really the thing that I expect that you will have occasionally. People are in the middle of discussing something, realize it's not quite ready for prime time. We need to do a little bit more research outside the meeting. I move to postpone this to the January meeting. And you do, and anything that you've postponed to January comes up under unfinished business. And again, you shouldn't call for it if you're presiding, if there isn't any. Where are you going to find if you have any unfinished business?
The minutes.
The minutes, absolutely right. You need to be reviewing those minutes if you're the presiding officer to look for any unfinished business. And then finally, the last item of business is new business. And that's where members bring new business in the form of a motion. I'm going to just remind you, this is not open discussion. Let's talk about the state of the state thing. This is business. It starts with the words, I move that. And for all of you presiders out there, I'm just going to tell you, when someone stands up and starts talking about, hey, I think we ought to have a float in the parade, and everybody loves a parade, and we could throw candy to the children and they'd get really interested. Stop them. If you are the presiding officer, stop them. Yes, you may embarrass that one member, but you will win the goodwill of everybody else in the room who appreciates not being drugged through that verbal morass to do whatever it is that this member wants. And you can do that in a couple of ways. Sarah, are you making a motion? If so, you need to start with the words, I move that. And she can then say, yeah, maybe she'll snap and say, I move that we have a float in the New Year's Day parade. Great. We'll move forward from there. Sometimes they still can't do it. In that case, presiding officers, point her to someone else in the group that you think can help her frame that motion and move on with the rest of your business, because it's not fair, right? This goes back to that whole efficient meeting thing. Not fair if we all have to sit and wait for Sarah to figure out what it is she wants to say. So, Hollow Star, Ross, do I have more questions?
There was a question, however, it's being answered in the chat.
I love that. Members helping members. I'm all about it. So I said members get to take up motions. So what does that mean? Well, there's 6 steps to handling a motion, right? A member makes it, another member seconds it, the chair states the question, Members are going to debate it. The chair puts the question to a vote and then announces the results. To make a motion, you first need to rise and seek the attention of the chairman. And then once you're recognized, and the chair can do that either by calling on you by your microphone if you're in a large convention, or by name. We generally advise folks only call on members by name. If you can call on every member in the room by name, so you're not showing favoritism to one member or the other. And then state your motion. My power tip to anybody making a motion is to write it down ahead of time. You will sound so much better. It will be more efficient. Your motion must be seconded. The seconder need not rise, does not get their name in the minutes. And the member says, I move that. And then the seconder says second. Once, because the member has written down their motion, they should then take it or have it delivered to the presiding officer, who then restates the question, right? It should exactly match the maker's language, or you should seek the maker's permission to change it. Sometimes I get one and it's not quite grammatically there, and I'm a grammarian, so I try to help them. Once the chair has stated that question, then the ownership of the motion changes. It no longer belongs to just the maker. It now belongs to all of us as the body of the meeting. And the chair does this by saying, it has been moved and seconded that, repeat the motion, and then, are you ready for debate? And then you debate. And hopefully your debate doesn't look like this, although I've been to a number of groups where that's how it starts. So how should debate look? Members are recognized or called on by the chair and granted the right to speak. This goes back to, first grade or kindergarten, passing the talking stick from person to person. The maker of the motion has a right to speak to it first, but does not have to do so. And then there are limits that, if you've established them, have to be followed. I told you earlier, the default in Roberts is 2 minutes for 10 minutes a time, but you may have different rules. Whatever those rules are, they have to be followed. Debate should generally rotate between those in favor and those opposed to the motion. How do you know who? Well, you ask. We've heard from a couple of people in favor of this motion. Is there anyone who'd like to debate against it? Nobody wants to speak against it. In that case, are we ready to vote? Right? Again, I'm not cutting off anybody's right to debate. I'm just saying this is the most efficient way. All debate should be directed to the chair. You cannot crosstalk with each other. You should never impugn your fellow members' motives or personalities. So debate should be professional, addressed to the chair. It should be confined to the merits of the pending question. You shouldn't debate about something that we've already taken care of or that's not there. You should not talk about a prior action that is no longer pending. Let it go. Again, we don't attack members' motives, and we're courteous. The whole point of all of those rules is that we can disagree without being disagreeable. And after the meeting is over, we can all go to the pancake house and have breakfast together, right? That's the goal, is that we can all be friends at the end of the day. So putting the question to a vote, right? After debate's over, then the chair is going to restate the question. This is at least the third time you've heard that question. You heard the maker make it. You heard the chair state it before debate began. The chair may have restated it as we were going through debate to help people focus on what it is we're supposed to be talking about, and then putting the question to a vote. And this is what goes in the minutes, because it's the last thing you hear before you vote. And the chair says, are you ready for the question? The question is that. And then all those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed say no. Now, certainly y'all are all proficient Zoomers. You know that in Zoom, we never, ever take voice votes. You should instead either vote using polls Or I love using the little reactions. You know, they got the green check and the red X, and the host can count the number of those, actually give you the number of those. And so I use that for voting with a lot of my clients, because I find it faster than setting up a poll and creating it. You also can use without objection. If there's no objection, we will have a float in the parade. No one has objected, we will have a float in the parade. And that's just as real as any other method of voting that we would use. Once the vote has been taken, whatever method you use, then the chair has to announce the results, which side has it, whether the motion is adopted or lost, what action we're going to take as a result of that vote, and then call for the next business in order. The ayes have it, the motion is adopted. The treasurer will pay $100 in symposium expenses. Is there any further business to come before the meeting? So that is the basics of handling a motion. Ross, what you got for me?
Well, not in respect to this slide that you just went through, and the question asked did get an answer. However, I'd be interested in hearing what you have to say about it. So how do you get a club that has never had a formally organized member business meeting to start to do these things?
That's a great question. And I guess the first question I'm going to ask is a little counterintuitive, and that is, do you need one? I mean, if you're going to have one, I can help you have a really good and efficient one. But if your club has existed for a certain amount of time, is accomplishing the things that they want to accomplish, people are attending and are happy with it, do you really need to, is it really broken enough that it needs to be fixed? That's probably not the answer you expected from someone whose job is following the rules. But I'm also eminently practical. And so sometimes people are just happy with what they're doing and they're accomplishing what they want to. They may not be accomplishing what you want them to. This was what Andrew had happen when he went to the improv meeting. They didn't have time enough to do improv, but they were established. They'd been going on this way for ages. They were happy. Now, there may be room for an actual different improv club that Andrew might want to start that would have an efficient agenda and lots of time left to do that improv work that he would like to do. But it doesn't have to be that group. It could be a different group. If, however, you've got a group that you think is not accomplishing all their goals and that having a meeting would help, then you gotta get buy-in, right? This is not something that one person can do alone. One of my clients refers to this as socializing the vote. Talk to friends and colleagues in the organization and say, yeah, hey, I've been reading and studying about this parliamentary procedure stuff. I heard this girl from Dallas talk, and she might be willing to talk to us and explain how we could maybe hold our meetings more efficiently. And I probably would be. Scheduling's always tight, but I'm always happy to present for anybody that wants to do better. And get a bulk of the group that's interested in pursuing this. Because if it's just one person that wants to do it, you will never, ever get that done. You might as well go outside and beat your head against the wall for something else.
Right, we have one more question. I think I'll add a little bit into this question because it may be twofold. One with being in person versus using Zoom. I think you've already provided an answer, but maybe you can reiterate. So the question is, if there's a small group of members attending, can you take a voice vote?
In Zoom, I never like voice votes because Zoom, it's hard to hear. It's hard to tell how many people are saying aye and no at any given time. If it's a small group of people and I can see everyone on the screen, and I've got some groups like that, then you have to hold your hand up right in front of the camera so that I can count hands. And I've got groups that do that, but you got to all be able to fit on one single screen, right? Otherwise, it's too much work it's too easy to flip back and forth. My personal favorite is the green checks and red X's. I think that's the fastest way to do it. That's under the reactions button on your Zoom. And the interesting thing is, if you've got an up-to-date Zoom, and you should always update your Zoom from time to time, those green checks, red X's, everything that's in those little squares, those stay up next to your name on the participants list until you take them down. Your raised hand also stays up until you take it down, or it's lowered for you. And then the other little temporary reactions, the thumbs up and the wow and the heart and so forth, those all go away after a few seconds. So that's an important thing to know in Zoom. But that's, and I see some folks are checking it out. I'm all for that. But I find that very helpful, and groups that I work with, I worked with the National PTA Board for some time during the pandemic, and we did all of our voting using those green X's and red or green checks and red X's. And that was our preferred method of voting. And then I would copy and paste my screen that had the count of the on there and paste that into the draft of the minutes, so that people would know that I was accurate in what I was sharing. So there you go.
Very good. Looks like there was a response that came back that mentioned also, unless you call each person by name for their vote.
And you can absolutely take a roll call vote, but I'm just telling you, if you got more than 5 people in the meeting, that is a beating after the second vote. It is just hard. People get real. I work with several groups that are 20 to 25 members, and roll call voting is just a huge waste of time. And sometimes you have to do it, but I try really hard not to if I don't have to.
All right, let's keep this flowing.
All right. So commonly used motions, right? Sometimes there are things that we want to do that are not just amend or just adopt the main motion. Sometimes we want to change it. And to do that, we use the motion to amend. Think of the motion to amend as my 10th grade English teacher, Mrs. Brown. Now, I'm old. When I took 10th grade English, we wrote out in longhand our papers on lined paper, and then Mrs. Brown would take them and would get that red pen out of her big bucket of red pens and sit there and cross out some words and insert others and tell me I misspelled something here, and so forth. So the motion to amend is just like Mrs. Brown did. It is a motion to change in an editorial sense the wording or even the intent of the main motion. There are 3 basic types of amendment: a motion to insert new words or to add new words at the end. That's one type, where we're just adding more words that weren't already there. A motion to strike out words or even whole sentences or paragraphs. And then finally, a motion to strike out an insert, which is a combination of the two. And so you can't say, I move to amend this because I don't think that we should have a float in the parade. I think we should sponsor the band. That's not a motion to amend. That's an idea. And ideas can become motions, but they have to be worded as striking out some things and inserting others, right? So that's the motion to amend. The motion to amend is adopted by a majority vote. What you have amended is the main motion. And so then after you have adopted the motion to amend, you still have to adopt the main motion as you amended it. So sometimes people say, well, we've just voted on this. Why are you making us vote on it twice? Well, the first time we voted to amend it, And now we're going to vote on it as the main motion. Sometimes though, amending doesn't help. It just needs to go and get a small group to work with it, right? So the motion to commit or refer is a motion that sends the main motion to a smaller group for further study or action. Things to think about. Do you want this to go to a standing committee? Do you have a standing committee that's the right group to handle this? Or do you want to stand up a special committee for it? Is the committee authorized to do something, or are they just supposed to study and report back? One of the primary types of committees that's appointed to do something is one we talked about earlier, the Minute Approval Committee. They're given authority to approve the minutes on behalf of the body, right? So that's a committee that's appointed to do something. Other committees are just appointed to study and report back, and then we'll all decide together what to do. When is their report due? Are they going to need a budget? All those things are things that you might want to think about with a motion to commit. Sometimes we just need more time, right? The motion's fine. We just don't know enough. So this is a motion that can delay further action till a certain time or after a specific event. So that might be later in this meeting, or it can be postponed no later than the next regular meeting. And then Roberts throws in, as long as it's within about a business quarter. Now, Robert, he was an Army general and he was an engineer. He was not a businessman, and he had absolutely no concept of Q3 versus Q4 in a business sense. So instead, what Robert says is don't count the month that you're in. And instead, if that next regular meeting is within any of the next 3 months. So we're here in December. So I'm not going to count December. Instead, I'm going to go out 3 months, January, February, March, the end of that month. So Robert says that March 31st is the next date that a business meeting can be and still be within this same business quarter. I think many of us would think differently if left to our own devices, but those are the rules within Roberts. So you can postpone something until 2 o'clock. You can postpone something until after the treasurer arrives with the books. If the treasurer is running late, you need to know a balance. You can postpone something to the next meeting, as long as that next meeting is before March 31st, 2022. And then finally, there is a motion for the previous question. Now, previous question to me is one of these real inside baseball terms that parliamentarians use. What it means to real people is a motion to end debate, an amendment, and move to a vote immediately, right? It limits the rights of members to debate, and so it requires a 2/3 vote for adoption, because debate was one of those fundamental rights of members we talked about. And it can be applied to the immediately pending question or to all pending questions. And the nice thing about this motion is it is undebatable. So, are there any questions about any of these commonly used motions?
Checking, and currently there are no questions.
Okay, well, cool. I'm coming right up on my hour that I was asked to keep it to. So I'm going to tell you, if you want to learn more, there are a couple of places. You can go to the National Association of Parliamentarians website at parliamentarians.org. NAP only studies Robert's Rules of Order. They have some great educational materials though, and I recommend them. I'm certainly a member. I also refer you to the American Institute of Parliamentarians at AIPparl.org. We also have some information and material for new members, offers some great training programs there. If you're interested in the correspondence course I teach, it is strictly an online course. I do not go to Wisconsin to teach this, but if you Google Introduction to Parliamentary Procedure in Wisconsin, the link is way too long to make it effective on a slide program, then you can go and you can find that course, and you are welcome to take it. If you do, please make sure that you write and let me know that you found out about it through this Toastmasters presentation. And you can always find me. My email is kaye@dallasparliamentarian.com, and my phone number, although I'm much more likely to answer an email than an actual phone number. So, Ross, how about a last set of questions?
Well, let's see what we have.
Okay. Also, there are handouts that were placed in the chat. And so they have a lot of the key information from here. And so I encourage you to download and review the handouts.
Yes, there's a question. Is there such thing as a friendly?
Okay, great question. So remember how I said that when the chair, you make a motion, another member seconds the motion, a chair states the question, and at that point, the ownership of the motion moves from belonging to the maker to belonging to the whole body. While it belongs to the maker, you can say anything. So you've made a motion to donate $100 to the public library, and someone says, hey, we're flush, give them $200. And the maker can say $200 before the chair has stated it. That's a true friendly. After the chair has stated it, the motion belongs to all of us. And so any amendments must be adopted by everyone. I will remind you, though, that the chair, if the chair senses, and this is part of the art of presiding, not the science, if the chair senses that everybody is in agreement with that, then the chair can say, is there any objection to striking out 100 and inserting 200? Hearing none, the pending motion is to donate $200 to the public library. So that's one of those things that you can figure out.
Okay, there's two more questions.
Okay.
Let's see, and I believe there's a couple of people, I don't see the hands raised, but we'll get to that in just a moment. So are there any role play videos that you could recommend for individuals to be able to see this in action?
There are. I will look for some specific links, but what I would suggest that you do is that you Google and look for the FFA, Future Farmers of America, Parliamentary Procedure Finals. Those kids are amazing. And those are going to be, if you're looking at the national finals, they're people that know what they're doing. They're going to be pretty good. And it's parliamentary competition, but they're really, really good. Not FAA, Emily, FFA, Future Farmers of America.
Okay. The next
Remember, if you eat, you're involved in agriculture. Okay, go ahead.
So the next one, and this is, I'd definitely love to hear the answer to this one because I've heard it being used before. So can you explain what is the term point of order and when should it actually be used?
Excellent. A point of order is something that any member can raise at any point. They do not need to be recognized. You simply stand up and call point of order. And what that means is that you believe that the chair has violated a rule and that you want to call the chair's attention to a possible violation of the rules. And so the chair will then properly say, state your point. And it may be, we didn't get a second on this motion, which may be a point that is well taken, or it may be a point that has been overcome by events, right? All a second says is that two people think that we ought to talk about this. If we're into our third or fourth person debating it, clearly more than two people think that we should talk about this. So that point of order would not be well taken. If, however, there's a motion for previous question and the chair tries to take it by saying all those in favor say aye, a point of order that this takes 2/3 and therefore You don't take 2/3 votes by voice vote. You should take it by show of hands or by rising, would be a point that is well taken. And so the chair's response is either that your point is well taken or not well taken. If the chair rules that your point is not well taken, then it is an appealable decision. So, and that's in the Parliamentary Procedure 201 class that I'm certain we'll be scheduling soon.
Okay, thank you for that tidbit. All right, the two individuals, one is Donna. Donna, do you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I'm just still confused about this prior question bit. Is this when like there's a lull or there's been enough conversation and you just want to wrap it up one way or the other? Is that what
Yes.
that refers to?
Yes, previous question means I am sick and tired of listening to this debate. Let's move on and do something. And it is a motion to end debate and vote immediately. And it takes a 2/3 vote to adopt.
All right, Andrew, you had a question or a comment?
Yes, I did. Going back to like what you were talking about, the previous question, on that slide, it said something about all, I don't remember exactly the wording, but something about something about all open questions. I was always under the impression you only had one open question. There was what you're voting on at that moment. Can you explain?
I can. So what the slide says is that it can be applied to the immediately pending question or all pending questions. So remember, right, we're only talking about one main motion at a time, but we may have a pending amendment, and then maybe someone moved a motion to refer it to a committee, and someone else has moved to postpone it till 2 o'clock this afternoon. All of those are in order. And so you can move the pending question, which if you move it right now would only be on the motion to postpone. Or if you move it on all pending questions, it would be, we're going to vote till this goes away one way or the other. And if we adopt the motion to postpone, then it goes till then. If we defeat the motion to postpone and instead go to commit, then you would vote on that. If you did not refer it to commit, then you'd get back to amend, right? Is that making some sense?
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I had one quick more question regarding you. How did you get started in such a thing, which seems very logical and not a lot of room for deviation?
I actually got started because a good friend of mine was appointed was elected as the national president for an organization that we both belong to. And she had asked them to put me on her board, and they declined. The nominating committee, that is, and no one ever went against the nominating committee in that group. That was just their culture. And so she said, I wanted you on my board, and they wouldn't let you. So I only control one seat. I'm going to make you my parliamentarian. And I said, but Marianne, I don't know anything about being a parliamentarian. And she said, it's a book of rules. You're a smart girl. Go read the book. And that's how I got started. I took the University of Wisconsin course that I now teach. And that was how I got started. And I really liked it. And so there you go. Now it's how I make my living.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It's amazing what people fall into.
It is. It is. I count myself very lucky to have fallen in here. So.
All right, Miss Kaye, we thank you so very much for everything that you provided to us today. We've even finished with a little bit of time left over. I would be remiss if I didn't give leadership the opportunity to have a few words. So we'll just start out with anyone from the NEMA Leader Group.
Well, I'll go first. Thank you, Kaye, so much for bringing your presentation. It was very helpful. Certainly for those of us who are not familiar with parliamentary procedure, we appreciate you taking the time to be here. And I'd like to thank the people who joined us for this presentation as well. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Marquita and we'll let Emily wrap it up.
Thank you, Nifa, and thanks to everyone that attended and participated today. Ms. Kaye, this is invaluable information that we can leverage for years to come. So I know I would be remiss without saying that. So it's very helpful, and it's helping to equip us to be better at these meetings. So I truly thank you, and thanks to those that are even outside the district coming in to join us for this information as well. It's how we do and be better from a Toastmasters all up perspective, and even communities that we're engaged in as well. So thank you for the time. Emily.
The best thing about today is it was as promised. It was parliamentarian procedures, understandable by those of us who are not parliamentarians. There was humor, there was anecdotal stories that were educational and effective. It was great. And I knew Kaye could do it. I had not seen this presentation. I'd seen a different one. She does this lovely thing about, so you're an officer, what does that mean? And then she goes through all of the officer roles, and that's what I had seen. And I just enjoy Kaye. How could you not, right? So I was so happy when she agreed to come and do this for the wonderful price of all of my gratitude. And you have all of my gratitude, and all of it from the district as well. Thank you so much for spending your Saturday morning with us. I appreciate it beyond measure. I'm going to turn it back over to Ross to wrap us up. Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Ross is on
you're on
mute.
mute.
I see what it is. I was on mute. Well, the wrap up is we will give everyone a little bit of time back. Thank you again immensely for taking out time to attend this workshop today. You could have found anything else to do on this day that you might have thought was going to be a little bit more fun or a little bit more educational, but you chose this opportunity right here. Take this back to your various clubs, spread the word, and remember, this has been recorded. So we'll have some information that'll come out momentarily or shortly from what is going to go on YouTube and any other platforms that we may use in showing this video. Thank you again very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.
Bye. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Andrew, did you have something else?
No, I just didn't lower my hand. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Thanks, Emily. I really appreciate it as usual.
You're welcome. I've got 2 more of these next spring. I don't know what they are yet, but they'll be up like usual.
Awesome. I'll be looking for it always. Let me figure out how to do this.
Emily, is there anything else that you need from me, my friend?
No, ma'am, I believe that is it. I do have a district challenge coin that I'm going to send to you via husband as a more physical token of my gratitude.
Thank you. Thank you.
So you can put that in your gift and your display wall. And I appreciate you taking the time. Kaye, it's been lovely working with you, and this was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Happy to do it. If you'd like another one sometime, let me know. Talk
All right,
to you
I will
guys
do.
soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Merry Christmas.